Welcome to a new video. Let's take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. The first story is called, Let's Take Away the Lesser Offense. My mother is a science teacher at a charter school. She teaches 8th grade kids. It's free to the public and admission is on a lottery system. But because of their status, they kind of get to impose their own rules when it comes to discipline, as well as holidays, breaks, etc. But they stick fairly close to public schools. This school operates on an infraction system, where depending on the type of bad behavior from the kid, they will receive a couple of warnings before an actual infraction in each category. Receiving an infraction can affect things like their ability to participate in clubs, field days, etc. On this day, my mum was doing an activity with one of her classes. It involved them using craft supplies to create some sort of model solar device to teach them about energy. This happens to be a class that my mother has a nice helper lady because a couple of the kids in this class have more severe autism and need constant assistance. My mum said she had been working on grading some papers at her desk when she looked up and saw that the floor and table around all the craft supplies was an absolute mess. The helper lady supposedly described it as looking like an art store that had exploded. My mum informs her class that they needed to pick up the mess, and since it was the common area of the classroom, they were all responsible. Cue a bunch of "but I didn't make the mess" grumbles from her kids, and little moves were made to actually clean the mess up. After a few more minutes, my mum tells them that they won't be dismissed from class when the bell rings if the mess isn't cleaned up. This prompts a couple of kids to kind of start to clean. But she was mostly met with more grumbles and uncooperativeness. So fast forward. The bell rings, there's still a mess. And all her students make a move for the door. My mum, not one to go back on her word, stopped them and told them she was serious. They were not allowed to leave until the mess was clean. This caused her kids, around 20, to rush into a slight panic and clean up the mess as fast as possible. With all of them working, it took about 2 minutes for them to clean up. My mother then had 20 faces turned to her, expecting my mother to grant them the magical pass that would prevent them from being tardy for the next class and therefore no warning or infraction. But my mother simply told them, "No, I told you all to clean or you would be held back. Go talk to your next period teacher and explain the situation to them. They'll decide if they want to count you tardy or not." So about 18 kids ran off quickly to their next class. But 2 kids, including the star of our show, a problem child, decided to instead go to the school's office and try and get a pass from the front desk and essentially tell on my mother. Now, my mum said the office is not supposed to issue passes. But the kids had managed to find a new office aide that didn't really know what she was doing and were in the process of getting passes written when the helper lady entered the office and caught the boys in the act. She instantly stopped the office aide and sternly told the boys that they needed to listen to what my mum had told them and go to class and talk to their current period teacher about it. The boys slinked off and the problem child ended up receiving a warning infraction for tardiness. The mother of the problem child did not like this. She emails my mother and very angrily demands to know why her child was held back in class and therefore tardy. My mum explained the situation to her, but the mother was having none of it. She demanded my mum talk to the teacher and have the tardy removed. My mum held her ground and said that she would not be doing that. The mother decides to show up at the school and gets the vice principal involved. He, with the mother in tow, comes to my mum and tells her that she wasn't allowed to hold kids back without giving them a pass. My mother asks what was she supposed to do when her kids acted insubordinately, to which the vice principal said my mum should have dealt with it herself. And that she needed to talk to the teacher and ask for it to be removed. My mum did not agree with this conclusion. But she couldn't deny her superior. So she agreed to it, which immensely satisfied the mother. But she would come to regret her fuss. My mother went in on the kid's record and noticed that he had only ever received one other warning for tardiness. And a second warning would still qualify as just a warning. The problem child, however, had received several warnings from multiple teachers for failure to follow directions. Something that not cleaning up a mess after instructed would certainly fall under. And, since my mum had been told she should have dealt with it herself, that's exactly what she decided to do. So my mother gives the problem child, as well as every other kid in class, an infraction for failing to follow directions. My mother decided to send a blanket email to the parents for her class, explaining why she had done it. And that for most of the kids, who had never had an infraction or only 1 or 2 on their record, it wouldn't be much of an issue and nothing more than a warning. The problem child and his mother, however, with a now much more serious infraction on the kid's record, will soon have to deal with him being punished for his copious failures to follow directions. The next story is called, You Want Me to Work on the Drive-Thru? A long time ago, when I was around 18, I used to work at a fast food location. My job there was to run the orders. This basically consisted of getting the food from a tray next to the kitchen and putting it into the bags with napkins and handing it out to the customer, either in the drive-thru or in the restaurant. I was pretty good at doing this. Now, I've had mild moderate hearing loss in both ears for as long as I can remember. I do wear hearing aids as well to help. I can hear without them. But if you don't have a loud, clear voice, there's no chance I am able to comfortably have a conversation with you. In saying that, even if you do have a loud and clear voice, if we are in a loud location, I will struggle. My managers knew I had hearing loss. Behind the counters, it was always so loud. Machines were constantly beeping, other workers yelling jobs to each other, etc. They were generally okay with me and I was generally okay with the jobs I had to do. I never had any issues. One day I went into work, signed in and went to see my manager. I assumed I would be running again, but we always had to check in with them before our shift. My manager, let's call her Karen, told me I would be trained on the drive-thru that day. I wasn't aware of what this consisted of and always tried to have a go before deciding I couldn't do something first. Now, Karen put me to work with another girl, Lisa, who knew the drive-thru protocol well and left us together. Lisa gave me a headset and showed me which buttons to use to take the orders. Here's where it gets a little hard for me. I wear hearing aids that go behind my ear. That means that all sound that goes into my ears comes from there. The headphones did not comfortably sit on top of the back of my ears and rested in the usual place of just on top of the ear opening. Now straight away, I knew I would have trouble. I tried putting the back of my hearing aids in the middle of my ear and put the headphones on top. I then tried taking them off completely but nothing worked. Regardless of what I did, I just couldn't clearly hear the customer ordering from the speaker. It didn't help that my hearing aids pick up so much background noise. So I could hear the kitchen beeps and yells of the staff louder than the customer's order. Basically, it made me feel really embarrassed and ashamed. Every customer I had that shift had to drive to the window and I had to take their order that way. Which was still hard for me. It was also just embarrassing to have to do that. After my shift, I explained all of this to Karen quite explicitly. I said I did not want to be put on the drive-thru, mainly because I just physically could not do that job and that I would hold up the drive-thru and ruin their 3-minute drive-thru rule. This just meant cars needed to be in and out of the drive-thru in under 3 minutes. This is something staff got yelled at a lot for at this location. She said okay and I went home. I was annoyed that I couldn't do the job. But I felt okay because I figured my manager understood. I had a shift the next day. I signed in and went to see the manager. Turns out Karen was working again. I said, "Hello, where am I working today?" She very abruptly said, "In the drive-thru," and threw the headset at me. I quickly reminded her as nicely as possible that I couldn't do the job. She said, "You are not the manager here." "I am." "So you will work where I tell you to work." We went back and forth a little bit and it ended when she told me to stop causing a scene and get to work. I had never felt so much anger towards someone I barely knew in my entire life. I swallowed my anger and said, "You know what, Karen, sure." She told me to hurry up and get into the booth. For the next 3 hours, I proceeded to mess up immensely. Not on purpose, mind you, but just because I couldn't hear. This turned most 3-minute drive-thru orders into 5 to 10 minutes. I could tell Karen was getting annoyed as she kept coming into the booth and yelling at me to hurry up as I was slowing the drive-thru down. I found out that shift from a coworker that the managers get incentives from the store owner each month if they get the most cars through the drive-thru in under 3 minutes. So, if one manager gets 167 cars through in under 3 minutes that month and another gets 260, the winning manager who got 260 would get a cash bonus and other some random things. It made me laugh because Karen would definitely not win that month. At the end of my shift, I walked out with my head held high, while Karen looked completely mad. She didn't say anything and I left with a cheerful, "See you next shift, Karen," waving to my friends as I left. My co-workers later told me that Karen was chewed out by the store manager for having the worst drive-thru score out of the 10 restaurants in the area. She blamed me instantly and I was called in for a meeting with the store manager. Let's call him Nick. At the meeting, I truthfully told Nick what happened and Karen was put under review. She shortly left after that. Just a quick word of advice to people who work with hearing impaired humans: please people, if you know someone that is deaf or hard of hearing, give them a break. If I could hear, it would be so awesome and I would want to hear all of the things. I don't turn my ears off on purpose, I promise. I always wish to be able to hear normally, but have accepted that I probably never will, and that's okay. I just hate when I have a run-in with someone who degrades and mocks me. The last story is called, "Look at How Much I Saved." In the 1980s, I was working for a company that did custom software development for large companies. All our employees were salaried with full benefits, including paid holidays and vacation. I was an account manager, responsible for a bunch of our people working on a project at a client site. This was a very important project for our biggest client, generating several $1 million in revenue. It was a good company to work for and we were very profitable. So profitable that we were acquired by a much larger corporation that had absolutely no experience in our business. Within 6 months, all our senior managers had been forced out. Our branch manager, my immediate superior, was replaced by a guy fresh out of the corporation's management training program. His entire background was in finance and human resources. It was late October when he called me in to discuss my account's performance, specifically how our costs were out of control. Item 1 was a vacation. He noticed that several of my people had accrued lots of vacation days and this shows up as a liability on the balance sheet. I explained how this was actually a good thing. When a person takes a vacation day, we have to pay him, but we can't bill the client for his time. Our policy was that people could cash in their accrued vacation at any time. The money we paid them was less than the revenue they generated by working. He explained that was contrary to corporate policy, as people would be paid twice for the same day. Effective immediately, all vacation must be used within the calendar year it was earned or it would be lost. Item 2 was paid time off. We had no formal policy covering personal and sick days. I told my troops that I expected them to be at work every day. But if they needed to leave early or take a day off for some personal business or because they were sick, I was okay with that and they'd get paid. But if it became a problem, like a guy who called in sick every Monday because he spent the weekend drinking or the woman who left early every Wednesday to get a manicure, we would take action. While we did have a couple of people who were out sick for a relatively long time, most took 2 or 3 days each year. Sorry, that was against policy. Effective immediately, all employees will receive 5 personal or sick days each year. And again, it was, use them or lose them. Item 3 was overtime. He couldn't believe that we were paying salaried people for working overtime. I explained that again, this is a good thing. When a client asked our people to work overtime, we billed for those hours. Since we had already factored all our overhead into the hourly billing rate, the profit margin on overtime hours was a lot higher than normal hours. He couldn't grasp that. As far as he was concerned, salaried people do not get paid for overtime. I said that if we stop paying overtime, people will stop working it and we will lose revenue. He didn't believe that. He assumed that everyone would happily put in the extra time for free. Effective immediately, we would no longer pay for overtime. Item 4 was the best. There was a guy on my project, Rich, who was widely regarded as a true expert on the software platform we were using. He literally wrote a book on the subject and taught a class at the community college. We managed to land this project because we agreed that Rich would be assigned to it. Because he was so good, we were able to bill him out at about twice as much as the other people on the project. His salary was also a lot higher than the others. According to the official corporate salary guidelines, Rich's salary was way above the maximum for his pay grade. I was told to replace him with someone cheaper. At this point, I knew that arguing was a waste of time. The next day I told my troops about the new policies regarding vacation, personal time and overtime. They were less than pleased. I reminded them that this was the end of October and they had to use all their accrued vacation and personal days before year end. I got our recruiters looking for someone to replace Rich. In mid-December, my new manager asked me again why Rich was still on the payroll. I said we were looking for a replacement, but it was impossible to find someone with his expertise and credentials. He said I had to get Rich off the payroll before year end and we'd worry about finding a replacement in January. I gave Rich the bad news. In February, I attended a meeting of all the account managers. In attendance was our area manager, our branch manager's boss. Branch manager proudly reported that he had eliminated overtime and the vacation backlog. He had also reduced headcount. Rich was not the only high-value employee to be let go. Then his boss asked why revenue was down by almost 20%. Branch manager had no explanation and blamed the sales staff. I raised my hand and explained that everyone took their accrued vacation, which for my account alone was more than 200 billable days. Since the new policy went into effect, almost everyone took their 5 days. Finally, the elimination of overtime resulted in a loss of almost 20 billable days. Since our average daily billing rate was $500, my account generated $150,000 less revenue than the previous quarter. All the other account managers reported similar numbers. Then I said that my entire project was about to be cancelled. We had missed a key deadline because so many people had taken time off. But the biggest problem was Rich's termination. The contract specifically said that Rich would be assigned as the technical lead. Since he was no longer our employee, we were in breach of the contract and the client was going to pull the plug. Within a week, the new branch manager was transferred to another division in another state where he could happily count paper clips and rolls of toilet paper. And Rich was brought back as an independent contractor. He knew the position we were in and demanded a considerable increase, driving our profit margin on him to almost zero. But the damage was done. The new policies on vacation and overtime remained in effect, and we all started leaving to work for our competition. Within 2 years, corporate shut it down completely. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content. Let me know what you think about the stories in the comment section below. Have a great day.